I want to welcome everyone to this Thursday edition of Next Practices Weekly. We'll be talking about hybrid and flexible work with a couple of outstanding guests, as we always do. My name's Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP. Hope everyone who lives in the upper Midwest or Northeast is doing all right in terms of the snowstorm, the ice storm, whatever it was when it hit you that came through just recently. I live in Rochester, New York, and it was definitely a mixed precipitation event for me. If you're new to these calls, maybe new to I4CP, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. What we mean by high performance are organizations that excel in four primary areas: revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. When we do our research, we like to tease out those practices that the upper quartile of organizations by those four metrics are doing more often than the lowest quartile, so that we can really look for those best and next practices that differentiate high-performing organizations. We are a member-based organization. If you're not familiar with our approach in the market, you see here just a small sampling of our many members, several hundred member organizations. You see they span across different size organizations, from the very large like Amazon and Accenture. You see different industries from Microsoft to Nike to Jack in the Box. You see some smaller organizations here as well. I want to give a special welcome to everyone on the call who is with a member organization. Welcome. We always love having you on these Thursday Next Practices Weekly calls. If you're not with a member organization, or if you're not sure if you are, by all means, get in touch with us and learn more about what membership entails. Want to do a couple of other quick reminders. One, our new study on culture fitness, the healthy habits of high performance organizations. If you missed last week's session, we had our co-founder and CEO, Kevin Oakes, as well as one of my research colleagues, Catherine Brecken, give an outstanding presentation on some of the key findings, much of which we often would only share with our member organizations. That was a public call. The archive of that, along with the deck and some notes, are posted up on our website. So by all means, if you missed last week's call, I highly encourage you to check that one out. The full archive has all of our sessions from this series going back well over a year now, but last week's in particular was pretty special. Also want to note our upcoming conference, the Next Practices Now conference, only about a month away, March 27th to the 30th. We hold that in Scottsdale, Arizona. Would love to have all HR leaders who are interested come join us at that. You see here just a sampling of the wonderful guest speakers that we'll have at this event. No vendors at this event. There's no expo, no trade show. It's just a great opportunity for you to peer connect with other HR leaders from across all different industries, both I4CP members and non-members. We're already breaking records for registrations this year, so it's going to be our best event yet. To learn more and to register, just go to i4cp.com/conference. Zeta has already put that link for you, along with the link to the culture fitness study that I mentioned. Those are both in the chat. Mentioning the chat, I'd like to keep that open, so we'll be using that throughout the call today. So by all means, we've got a large group today, so folks won't be able to come off mute to ask questions, but by all means, add them in the chat, and I'll be watching that to curate some good questions for our guests. We'll be introducing the guests in just a moment, but for now, I want to introduce my co-host and colleague, Carrie Bevis, who's Managing Director of Communities and Partnerships here at I4CP. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Tom.
Good to have you with us today. Also want to note the upcoming calls in the series. You see the great lineup we've got every week, every Thursday at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. We've got great HR leaders coming up from Providence Health, the Toro Company, Ecolab, and Getty Images. You see a nice range of different topics for those upcoming calls as well. We'll be taking a break after that March 23rd one. As I just noted, our in-person conference is the week after that, and then we'll pick up again in April. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Carrie to lead on the conversation and introduce our two guests today.
Thank you. It's my honor to introduce Annette McEnery and Joanna Gildart. They are coming from Experian, Senior Vice President of HR Operations, and we have a Senior HR Business Partner with us. to share more about their work. I would really love for each of you to first start off with sharing a little bit about Experian for those that might not be familiar with the organization and your roles.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Annette McEnery, Senior VP of HR Operations, which has over the last few years evolved into all things COVID and future of work. Never had any idea where it would go, but it landed in our operations group. But I have learned a lot, and we have a lot to share with you today. I've been with Experian 27 years, a gasp, a long time. It sneaks up on you. I've been in all different roles within HR, primarily TA, business partnering, before I landed in operations and realized I really enjoy looking at things from an employee's point of view and trying to create the best experience, as we call it now, employee experience, and taking that perspective, leading our cultural transformation, organizational efficiency, all those kinds of things. So I'm based in Southern California. We have a large campus in Costa Mesa, but I work out of my home most of the time. Joanna, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Joanna Gildart, Senior HR Business Partner at Experian. I have been here almost 10 years, so not the 27 of Annette, but fairly long. I've served in a variety of business partner roles during my tenure, and currently am a business partner to our product development organization within North America. And I'm based in Austin, Texas, where we have a larger office in the US. And a little bit about Experian, for those of you who aren't familiar with us. Experian is the world's leading global information services company. So during life's big moments, whether you're buying a home or a car, you're sending a kid to college, you're trying to grow your business, we empower consumers and clients to manage their data with confidence. So help individuals take financial control, access financial services, businesses to make smarter decisions, lenders to lend more responsibly, and organizations to prevent identity, fraud, and crime. We have 20,000 people across 44 countries, and we're listed on the London Stock Exchange and a constituent of the FTSE 100 index.
Thank you for that context. And between the both of you, we have over 30 years of experience at Experian. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the new normal, but first I want you to take us back in time, pre-pandemic, kind of paint the picture of what the culture and work was like at Experian.
Okay. We've always had a large remote population. Well, we thought it was large. It was 20-something%. And so we are very dispersed. And I'm going to mainly be talking about our North America region. Joanna mentioned we have 20,000 people globally. I'm responsible for North America, which at Experian is Canada, US, Costa Rica, and Chile, believe it or not, but that's our what I call our region. And we have about 6,500 employees. And so we're very dispersed, and we're used to that. We also grow a lot by acquisition. So, that always brings in new cultures and things. But really over the last 7 years or so, we've really been able to define and hone in on our culture around DEI, around what we call creating a better tomorrow, which is not just words, but it's how do we make things better for consumers that are using our products and tools, for the communities we live in, and for our employees, and of course our clients. And that really is around how do we make things better? How do we build in trust? How do we have people take ownership of what they do? And along with that becomes the caring that we have. So really our CEO has been genuine about DEI and including people, creating a place where they belong and can be their best. So we've had some focus on well-being before the pandemic. We really honed in on that. We'll talk about that. We've had our work structure was somewhat flexible, kind of depended where you worked, who you worked for, but overall our philosophy was be flexible. Most of our workforce is professionals. salaried professionals. We do have a large call center that are hourly employees, and there's always going to be a little more structure there for coverage and such, but a pretty flexible environment. And again, the high trust. So I would say that's where we were before.
All right. So then moving into the way that all of our lives, the earth seemed to change over the pandemic. So many organizations moved remote, hybrid, as Tom mentioned, 20% pre-pandemic is already pretty significant. But how did you approach moving to a kind of new normal hybrid environment?
Well, people say the new normal, and at first I don't like that term because it's like, I don't want to admit this is going to be normal because there was just so much chaos and disappointment that came with COVID. But now as we're living with it, I'm seeing the silver linings. And some of the things that have really come out of it, really our approach has been to lean on our culture and focus more on trust. And we did really well during those years. And so that means something. People must be productive or we couldn't be doing so well. And I think with that, we leaned into, let's let people choose. And we heard loud and clear, and Joanna will talk a little bit more about this, about our listening strategies, but we heard loud and clear that people liked working from home. And we had a big decision to make, like all employers did. Do we pull people back into our fancy, expensive offices? Or do we let them sit empty and be ghost towns? Well, listening to our people and knowing that we were doing well and that people could be productive from home, our approach was really to give people choice. So what we did was we said, tell us if you want to be office-based or home-based. Where are you going to work most of your time? And based on that, that would drive a lot of other decisions like, can I take my monitor home? Can I take my desk chair home? And it's like, well, what's your preference going to be? Because wherever you work the most is where your equipment should be. So once we decided to let people have choice, I think everyone really took to that really well. And we said, let's go with that. And again, we'll talk about real estate in a minute, but we are letting people really work and anywhere in the US that is best for them. So some people move around, some people are remote, and some people do choose to be in the office. So I mentioned that I'm talking about North America, but globally, Experian took the same approach, was that really the principles of our approach is trust your people, offer them flexibility, and enable success. So we've got to make sure they're able to be successful.
Quick clarification question from the chat. Your customer service employees, are they also part of that remote work plan?
Yes. Yes.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for noting the same principles applied internationally as well. Did you find any differences in some of the different countries you mentioned earlier? I think Costa Rica, Chile. Did you find any differences in terms of their preferences?
No, everyone
really?
loves working at home, or at least the chance to. Now I say everyone. There are, in some of our larger offices, we have a couple hundred people a day coming in, but that's compared to like our Costa Mesa office, our headquarters. We have room for 1,300 people.
Sure. Yeah.
It's
There's always
different.
Individuals, even 3 years since the start of the pandemic, that, they didn't purchase a home with a home office in mind, or they rent and they have a relatively small apartment, both in the US or in other countries. And those folks, choose not to work from home, or they just have another reason for that preference. So every company has some individuals like that.
Now, Costa Rica and Chile have been similar to the US. Some of our other countries in other regions, it's more of a cultural shift for them. Some of them never had remote workers before, right. So it's been a much bigger change for them.
Right.
Could you share some of what you heard in the aftermath of those decisions, either through your employee listening surveys, or if you have other stats that show changes in productivity during that time?
Joanna, did you want to take that, the listening?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we had multiple different regular pulse surveys, and we still do this to this day. We actually launched one this morning, where we measured obviously employee sentiment really, but from a productivity, culture, employee experience, we are a high performing organization generally. And so our revenue, we actually hit our revenue growth or exceeded our revenue targets, both in FY21 and FY22, meeting kind of our maximum bonus potential, which is obviously super engaging and exciting for our workforce. And then our net promoter scores also increased. We measured turnover as well, and we didn't really get terribly impacted or hit by the Great Resignation. And so our attrition, regretted attrition reduced actually during this time from 14 to 11%. We have diversity metrics where because of this, we were able obviously to recruit in various places where we were able to increase our diversity for underrepresented ethnicities from 28 to 45%. Specifically, our Black representation increased from 6.3 to 8.8. Our workforce, our percentage of women in the workforce, which was huge because we obviously all saw and witnessed kind of women leaving the workforce at high rates, we remained constant at 49%. And specifically on our listening surveys, we showed 95% of our employees feel flexible working enabled them to be productive. 92% felt it allowed them to collaborate effectively. 80% felt connected to our culture, and 87% are connected to our purpose. And we still ask those questions today. So I'll be curious, obviously, to see kind of how those results turn out on the current pulse survey that we're taking.
Gotta say, those are some very impressive numbers, both the diversity numbers, the drivers of engagement numbers. That, thank you for that drill down into some of those metrics. But just to me, the most impressive is, compared to most other organizations, the lack of attrition results that you saw. That's amazing, because so many companies, you know, the Great Resignation and so many other things were hitting companies pretty hard. I think your approach helped defend that off. And even if for, you know, in terms of some metrics you were just flat, that's still better than negative. So that's a great result. Very good. There's two questions from Jay in the chat. I'm going to hold off on the real estate one till a little bit later because we have that on our agenda. But the one was just a follow up, Joanna. What platform do you use for the pulse surveys? People always want to know what HR tech is being used.
Qualtrics.
Qualtrics. Yep, one of the leaders in that space. So very good.
Yep.
Also building off of those extremely impressive stats, it is a next practice to be measuring employee connectivity, their sense of connection to their coworkers, to the company's purpose. And I want to learn a little bit more about how you went about supporting and fostering connection in a hybrid work environment, and maybe specifically what things you were able to carry over versus what things you had to build new in this situation.
Sure, let me take that. I think connection is everyone's greatest fear through all this. How do we call it the connective tissue, and you know, our CHRO says, how do we make sure our new hires have that connective tissue and feel our culture and know they're part of it? And it is scary. It's like, how in the world do we do this? It's new for everyone. So there are a lot of different things. Let me start with just being a dispersed workforce. We had all different kinds of communication tools throughout. We have different business units, of course, and you know, some people that talk all the time and some people that don't know other people even exist. So one of the things we did was really to lean into Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Teams. We were just putting that in March 2020. It was very new. Not all groups were using it. And we determined at that time, that's what everybody's going to use. We need people to get familiar with it, comfortable with it. The sharing features of it, it has been fantastic for us. So we do have that single conference chat, all that in there. So I think that's really helped. Video, really making sure people are comfortable with video. I know when it first started, in that first week that we were home, that we thought we'd only be home 2 weeks, my boss was FaceTiming me all times of the day. And I'm like, I was just like mortified. Oh my God, I'm not ready. And, you know, I look back on that and I laugh now and I go, I'm so glad he did that because it made me be comfortable with it. So what we did was we encouraged our executives to start just using their iPhone at home and doing a little clip about what's going on in my day. Oh my God, my kids are here. I'm not used to this. How am I supposed to do calls? I have to cook dinner now. And so I'm making this homemade pizza, watch me. And it got everyone comfortable with it because they're sharing these very personal things from their living room with dogs running through and kids in the background. And I think it got people comfortable. I think Joanna's going to talk about one of the guides we put together to help people, and we called it Aspire to Be Well. And as soon as execs started doing it, other employees started doing it and just sharing, how am I coping? What am I doing so I don't go crazy during this quarantine and things like that. So using video on these calls is such a connection measure. And the more you can get people comfortable with that, the better. The less multitasking is going on and focus and getting to know each other. So I think that's been really important for us. Now what we're doing is we're trying to focus on different cohorts. Of course, you work with your people that you need to get your work done all the time and you get to know them. But what about other connections and other places you can belong? One, of course, is our ERGs. We've had those in place a few years. They're evolving and growing, and that's a place where people can connect with others. But what we're trying to do now is, because we have people all across, like just take the United States, there are local employees that might be in your geographic region that you don't know about because they work for a different business unit. So we're taking steps to connect those people. And honestly, the employees started doing this themselves. It was very organic. It was like, hey, I know there's someone else in this area. Let's get together for lunch. Let's do a happy hour. They hear about all the things the big offices do, like volunteer events and things. Let's do that ourselves. So what we did was we just created distribution lists, and we look at everyone's zip code and we say everyone within 50 miles of an area, we put a distribution list together. So if you look in our Outlook distributions, you'll see 50 miles from Allen, Texas, 50 miles from Austin, 50 miles from in all the different areas. And it gives the employees a chance to find each other. So of course the zip codes aren't listed or anything, but it's just a group of names of people that they can connect with. So it's kind of, I think of it as a cohort of your geographic area, more people across the company. Beauty of that is you get people mixing across BUs, and we have a one Experian mentality that's hard to really live when you're busy in your everyday work, but creating a cohort like this certainly has helped. We're going to be doing the same for new hires. This is new for us, but we're just starting. Everyone who starts within a certain month, that will be a new hire cohort. And we're going to have one big event, call it orientation. I don't call it orientation. It's the beginning of onboarding, where you really focus on connecting these people, again, all different levels across business units, and building, showing them our culture. So not just telling them, but showing them. So we're trying to get creative, because right now we'll be doing it virtually. And my hope is, and our CEO's hope is, one day to do it in person once a month. And we'll bring these people together to start to feel our culture and see what it is and what it's like to be here at Experian. Okay. So those cohorts are what we're really trying to do to connect people in different ways.
I love that, going, just if I can jump in on that, going beyond the immediate team that you work with, which it's fairly easy even online to be well connected with them. Carrie, I know you have long been one of our main people that work with Rob Cross and our Connected Commons group. I know his research has discovered that as well as our member Microsoft has done their own studies that have shown that during these last 3 years, the connections within your team remain pretty strong, but I believe, is it called bridging ties, the ones that are between different parts of the organizations that did suffer because of remote and even hybrid work. So great, Annette, that you're focusing on that.
Yeah. And the other thing, now that the people can come out now more and such, we're really encouraging, we're calling them, I guess, not a formal name, but collaboration events. So at the larger locations, having people come into the office for a reason, not just say, you got to be in 2 days a week, like a lot of employers are doing. It's more, hey, we're taping the town hall. Let's all watch it together from the office. Food always helps. We'll have a food truck there. People love that, to come, even just a free lunch, or celebrations. We were big on like Halloween, and those kinds of things were a big part of our culture. So we're trying to bring those back in. So maybe you go into the office once or twice a month, but there's something going on and you're going to see people. You're not going to enter a ghost town. So those kinds of things we're really pushing.
We are really seeing some of the highest performing organizations doing just that. We had, to your point, Tom, we got together with the I4CP Connected Commons community earlier this week, and we had one of our members at Workday sharing how they're helping make it worth the commute to bring people in person, because they have found through their pulse surveys, their connectivity data, using all kinds of passive and active sources, that having that in-person time does build a sense of purpose, connection to each other, stronger connections, but you really have to make it worth that drive in. And so no surprises, food. I love the idea of coming together for kind of a shared watching experience or kind of town hall. That's brilliant.
Kathleen in the chat was just sharing that at her organization, they do the same thing, and they've named it the acronym CATO, C-A-T-O, collaborate at the office days, and food is definitely seems to be a part of the incentive package there. So that's great.
Yeah, I think having a purpose and going in, because I know I'm near Costa Mesa and it's a huge campus, and I would go in sometimes just to see what's going on, and there was nothing going on. And I'm sitting in my office all alone, and I'm going, why am I here? Why am I wearing shoes? I could be home in my slippers. No one would know. So it's like, I think that whole thing about a purpose and a reason to go in means a lot to people.
Yeah, we sort of predicted that years ago. I think it was in 2017 or 2018. We did a joint research project with Rob Cross and the Connected Commons on collaboration. And one of the key findings out of that was the importance of intentionality and what we called purposeful collaboration. That was in fact the name of the entire research series. And so that was back in the days of very little remote work, very little hybrid concerns, everyone just being in the office. And even there, purpose and having intentionality with when you collaborate. The big driver for that at the time was Rob's research around avoiding collaborative overload, people being in too many meetings, too many redundant things, collaborating too much. Now we have maybe a little bit of the opposite problem at times, looking to say, okay, well, where do we really need to collaborate in person versus online, and be as intentional about that as we can. I wanted to just call out also, Annette, before we move on to some other topics, the authenticity you mentioned about video. There was a clarifying question in the chat, and thanks, Joanna, for answering that it wasn't completely mandatory to always be on video, of course. There's moments where it doesn't make sense, or you're not comfortable, or you're in the car, or whatever it might be. And also, I think all of us collectively across organizations experienced a sort of curve of use of video, where initially we were encouraged to do it. There was the authenticity. I congratulate your leaders on modeling that behavior for everyone else, making it okay to have the dogs or the background, or to not be fully ready for camera. And so that's great to see. But then if you're on video too much, we don't hear this phrase as much anymore, but there was that period where Zoom fatigue was a big deal. And that's in part driven by being on camera so much. And if you see yourself on camera, as I'm currently doing with myself, that's not something that's natural for people. I mean, through evolution, we don't go around seeing ourselves all day. There's not a mirror in front of me, right? We're used to seeing other people, but not ourselves. And I think there was some research that showed that at least one element of Zoom fatigue was this seeing yourself on camera all day, meeting after meeting after meeting. And so choosing to not be on camera at times also makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, it's choice for us. It's all about choice, but we encourage it by modeling it.
Yeah, so important. And speaking of modeling, the managers, our research has found, are often the linchpins of a culture inside an organization. What kinds of resources did you give to managers to kind of help them navigate this change and role model?
Loads. So as Annette mentioned, we did create the Aspire to Be Well guide, and that was really for everyone, so managers and employees. And that was always and continually involved. So that guide was really a flip book full of information and resources, because managers are employees too. And so the content that was in there, or is in there, was really about, hey, it's summer break now and you're still at home and your kids are definitely at home now. So how do you play this role and what resources can we provide you? And in there, we kind of embedded videos from managers or our executives that were the selfies walking around their house with their children. So that guide was super useful, and it ended up being, I think, over 60 pages for sure, and was definitely well regarded throughout the organization. But for our managers specifically, we had guides for remote working, hybrid working, as we kind of evolved throughout the pandemic, that definitely had tactical information, such as technology tips around Teams videos, setting up a Teams channel, because that was all kind of new to the organization, as well as links to curated playlists within our LMS that had how to lead a dispersed team, how to have an engaging meeting through video and content like that. And it added a social element of learning in there. So people could connect to their peers or ask questions, and even managers could do that to say, hey, this isn't working, or this is working, try this. So those were kind of more of the, I guess, manager direct from a work standpoint. And then from an overall benefit standpoint, to support our employees, both managers and employees, we did enhance our benefit offerings. So enhanced our EAP services, with whether it was talk to text, virtual therapy, or even resources through care.com, such as hiring a babysitter for the night, just so people could kind of get away and have a parents' night out.
I'm looking at some of the other logos that you have on the slide, and I see a couple that also relate to financial well-being, which I imagine goes hand in hand with the type of company Experian is. Can you talk to how you thought through the kind of holistic model of what it means to be well?
Yes, for sure. So this is something that we're really proud of, and we've made a lot of strides in the past few years. Overall, our well-being approach is sponsored by our global CFO, and he really leads the way with sharing unguarded personal stories, has his own videos around kind of how he's dealt with his own mental health and well-being. And so over the past few years, we've really centered kind of our leadership and focus around holistic well-being, mainly on mental health and well-being, as well as this financial inclusion aspect. I'll focus on mental health first, because I really want to highlight this. I think it's pretty cool what we've done. But we have a global well-being hub. So this is a one-stop shop for our employees to find resources of support, regardless of what region or country you're in. So telemedicine, video counseling, our EAP programs. We also have, in alignment with World Mental Health Day, and sponsored by our Aspire ERG, we host a Your Mind Matters Week in October. And so we organize events and create space for our employees to connect and discuss and share ideas around well-being. And then one part that is super unique that I really love is what we've done around our mental health first aiders program. And so we created an internal network of over 400 employees. Our goal was to train at least 1% of our workforce, and we overachieved this. But these employees have been trained to be mental health emergency points of contact. And so employees in need can find a first aider, they can review a summary of their experience and passions, find someone who might be a fit for them to kind of talk through anything. And the first aiders are trained to listen for and identify possible mental health needs. So they don't diagnose, but they have resources at their fingertips, and they listen and they can point people to places. So that's definitely the mental health and well-being side of things. Financially, obviously, Experian, our mission purpose is of creating a better tomorrow for consumers. So this clearly extends to our employees. And I mean, quite honestly, credit is confusing. I work here, still confusing. So, I mean, how do we help each other? We really, I guess, sponsor and share our own products, which are free to our employees. So Experian Boost, Experian Go, you can have your paid bills, such as your rent, included in your credit score, and Experian Identity works as well. One super cool thing that actually came out this week is we have a new product called Bill Fixer, where you can submit a bill and we have a team that can negotiate your bill down to a lower rate. But what we've done there is, hey, we had a team that launched this product. Our internal teams are testing it and people are getting a benefit from it. They're lowering their bills, and it's cool to see employees excited about helping each other and really empowering kind of this financial inclusion across the company. We have other things such as obviously internal credit education that we work through. And then one thing I'm most proud of is our hardship fund, or now our Experian Cares Fund, which started in the US and is now global, where if people are impacted by a natural disaster or unforeseen events, they can apply, and it is funded through Experian as well as employee donations. So loads of information, but wanted to make sure that you were able to hear kind of all that we're doing for sure.
No, go ahead.
Well, I definitely want to mention a couple things there. One, great selection of resources for financial well-being. I4CP shared a new study relatively recently about financial well-being, and that is one of the areas often underlooked by employers and one of the most important to employees. So bravo there. And on the mental health first aid, I've taken the course. It's something that has come up a lot in our employee well-being exchange at I4CP, but I love that you took the next step at Experian to then create a network of those people. The training is free out there for people to take if you're interested. But what a great example of then really helping to create a network, knit those connections, because if you're also on the receiving end of trying to do something with other employees' issues, you also are going to need someone to fall back on.
Yeah, I'll just second that. I think very few companies have taken that next step of creating that network of sort of frontline folks that people can talk to. I know EY is another company that prides themselves on having done that, but I think they're few and far between. I hope it's a next practice in our lingo here at I4CP that maybe more companies will take the time to do. Certainly our research on holistic well-being all around from 2019 found, all areas, and I think we identified 6 different areas of well-being: physical, mental, obviously being the 2 most common. Financial, as Carrie said, we've done a deep dive on that more recently with a pulse survey. In part, we did that because we recognize that there's some tougher economic times now. We keep seeming to put off the word, the big R, recession, which may still be looming for later this year, but certainly there have been layoffs in the tech industry and other industries as well. And so having this kind of better education on financial well-being from your employer can help no matter what comes next.
Should we talk a little bit about the real estate at Experian?
Yeah, you mentioned that early on that we'd get to that, Annette, and one person, Jay, in the chat did have a question on that. So tell us what your footprint looks like today, how it's different maybe than pre-COVID, and then what your plans are going forward.
Okay. Well, we own and lease several buildings across the US, Costa Rica, Chile. Some are very large campuses and some are small. And I mentioned we've grown a lot by acquisition. So imagine when you acquire companies, you get all these extra little offices here and there. So we've got a real variety. Part of our thinking on this is if we're going to offer employees choice, and we've heard loud and clear that most want to be remote, what do we do with all these sites? So we have where we lease, we have renegotiated when they come up. Some offices we have closed when there's just nobody that really wants to work in them. So we have closed some. We're also looking at consolidating some. So some of our larger campuses, so that you don't walk in and feel like it's a ghost town, we're consolidating people into like one building so that we can shut down the other buildings. It saves our carbon footprint. It saves money because heat, electricity, cooling, cleaning, all that stuff gets shut off. We're not at a point where we're ready to really sell any of our buildings yet. It's just we haven't gone there. because we really see these collaboration events that you need hubs. And at some point, when the big R isn't looming so much, we'll be more open to more travel. I mean, people are traveling for business, but it's,
Sure.
everyone's being cautious right
Yeah,
now, and
it's
we
tempered.
are being smart about it. Yeah. We want to have hubs where people can come together. We do hackathons. We do celebrations, like I mentioned. We do fun stuff. We do tons of project kickoff. We have agile groups that need to work together and be in the same place. So we want to have more collaboration hubs. So we're not ready to let go of buildings yet, but we want to be smart about it, save where we can, and see what comes up. So right now we've reduced our costs some by reducing some of the smaller offices and closing some.
Couple of follow-up questions on this. Have you reconfigured any of the spaces to promote more collaboration, that sort of thing?
Yeah, where we're consolidating into smaller spaces, we're definitely making them more collaborative, more lounge-like,
Yeah.
for people when they do come together for events. You might need, an hour to run off and go jump on a meeting on your laptop or something, or go do some emails. So we want to make sure people have space for that. Some of the offices are small enough that we are doing hot desks or hoteling where you actually sign up to sit somewhere. We're trying not to be so formal about it because that's just not our culture, but we want to make sure people have the best environment they can to be productive. So it kind of varies office by office.
And that was my other question, of whether or not that's a trendy thing, the hot desk hoteling scenario. In some cases, you maybe need to do that where you've consolidated down, like you said, and there's only so much space for cubes and offices. But in other cases where you haven't done that and still have plenty of space, well, it can be more informal. Right,
exactly. And we're not seeing that people really love that, the hoteling and such. So we're trying to take the best furniture we have and use that in the consolidated spaces.
Yeah.
As you think
The funny
about
thing was our large campus in Costa Mesa, 1 week before middle of March 2020, we had just revamped the whole office, redecorated, beautiful. People hadn't even completely moved in, and we said, go home. So it's really strange. We have this beautiful office, but again, we're taking the best of the best and making a more active place where you'll see people and such instead of wandering empty halls.
Well, one thing that we've been talking a lot about in the Connected Commons community that I have a feeling you're talking about at Experian too is what modes of work are best to come together and do in person, kind of thinking beyond the energy building culture events and some of the kickoffs. Kind of at what point are you letting team leaders or managers make those decisions and kind of pushing decisions down more locally of when and how to use those hub spaces?
Completely. Yeah, we are letting them do that. The offices are open and available. There's no restrictions. You don't need a vaccine like we had for a while or anything like that. We encourage people to use the offices, and we do push that down. It really is up to managers, team leaders, project managers, when it's best to pull people together. Again, it's almost always optional, so we've learned how to use Teams, whether you're at home or in an office, which is very different because you get in the office and you're sitting next to the person who's also on your screen. It's weird, but we're getting pretty good at it because we do have, the hybrid culture and such. So there's some little tricks that we've learned. But we definitely, like I said, encourage it, but we don't force it, and we let it kind of be organic.
Yeah, great to hear that great to hear that you've pushed the decision making down more locally and to the lower level managers and teams. That's definitely what we've heard from lots of high performing organizations, and they're all seeing good results from that. Wanted to call out, just go back for a second to the well-being and the mental health side of things, because people are very interested in that. I liked Leslie's comment in the chat that they regarding the first aider comment, the program that Joanna had mentioned, they have a similar one, Jedis of the Mind, they call it. I love that name, being a Star Wars fan myself. And then our colleague here on the research team at I4CP, Judy, said that she's recently seen some research that managers play a large role in people's mental health, even as much as their partners at home and their therapists do. So what kind of, and maybe this could be a question for either of you, Annette or Joanna, what are you doing to sort of educate managers on the importance of this? And managers have a lot on their plate. They did before COVID, before 2020. They have even more now today. We did a study on manager and leader behaviors, which things have become more important since 2020. We did that about 8 months into the pandemic, and all 69 behaviors were claimed to be more important. So it's like, we've put a lot on leaders and managers' shoulders, and yet, as Judy is saying, the research shows managers play a big role in the mental health of their employees. So what have you done on that front for your managers?
Yeah, I can take that. Generally, the mental health and well-being with our focus from our global CFO, we have continually embedded this through our executives about just speaking about it and making people aware and having them kind of role model that this should be part of your conversations and your one-on-ones with your employees. If something's off, you should ask them why, and that's okay to ask them. You shouldn't be afraid to have those conversations. And so just encouraging kind of that dialogue and going beyond just the tactical tips of, hey, get everyone on video for a Teams meeting, or, schedule a daily stand-up. It's more of, hey, are you really digging in to find out kind of what your employees are working on, how they're feeling, what's going on? So it's a lot, I would say, of coaching and in a different way of modeling kind of what a traditional manager role is. And I would say the role of the manager changed, but so did the business partner role, in the sense of now you have to think about that. And now you have to pivot to more of this kind of new role and workforce dynamic that's happening.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's so interesting to me, who has been such a long career in HR, how the things we encourage managers to talk about and employees to talk to each other about: be your whole self, be your whole person, bring it to work. It used to be, oh my God, leave it at the door. We don't want to know anything. Don't tell me so much. It's so different. I love it. And I love to see this evolution in the workplace, where it's become, because I think that's where people can do their best, if they can be themselves. But it's new for a lot of people.
It is. I'm glad, Joanna, you mentioned that there's coaching provided, that the HRBPs play a role, because I was going to go exactly where you went in that this is a big change. It used to be taboo to mention these things or to expect managers to do this. It was like, no, go to HR with that, or go outside, use the EAP, whatever it may be. So it has been a big change. Have you found, that most of your managers, given your great culture, have been receptive to this change, even though it's putting more on them? Have you had some difficulty with some folks, perhaps, or has it been generally, just part of the ocean we swim in now, basically?
Yeah, I think that the general approach is that, people are super receptive because they're going through it too. So it seems as though generally people are pretty empathetic about, hey, what's going on? I won't lie, it's been a challenge for a lot of people. And it is daily. You don't know kind of the different nuances that happen. So it's definitely a learning curve for sure. But every day you step through probably a new situation. And the biggest thing I think is that people are able to learn from each other. And so we recently launched a leadership exchange, which is something that we've never had before, but obviously it has a lot of learning content and different things to support our leaders, but part of that is the social learning. And so that you can connect with other leaders globally across Experian and just say, hey, how did you handle this situation, or what's working for you or what's not? And they can leverage their kind of peer network there if they're running into challenges. So.
That's a great example. And it sounds like from everything you've shared, you've done your absolute best to bring everybody along on this journey with you and meet them where they're at with different kinds of resources. I was thinking in your question, Tom, just how we think about culture innovation and finding the influencers in your network to help activate the culture that you want to flourish. but also having to deal sometimes with those that aren't on board with the changes and figure out how to deal with some of those negative relationships. Is there anything that you did to identify some of those influencers before you embarked on this?
Oh, this is fun. So I will say that we haven't, I am a big fan of O&A, and in the businesses that I support, we haven't done this necessarily broadly across Experian, but we have tested it out in certain pockets. And in the businesses I support, we're measuring O&A prior to the pandemic from an acquisition standpoint. And so that was one tool that we leveraged, like, hey, we have this data going in, let's measure kind of 6 months in to see if anything's necessarily changed. And I mean, the results that we found really were, it was more people were connecting to, I guess, others than they normally did because of the different work that was going on. And so not broad across Experian, but in certain pockets, we were measuring through kind of O&A and figuring out who were influencers and who were pockets. And maybe those were the people we needed to focus on as far as burnout might go, and making their manager aware that these people keep getting tasked with all these questions and they're the ones connecting new hires to other people. So it was super useful data for sure.
Many folks on the call probably know what it stands for, but just for those who maybe don't, Cecilia gave 2 of the 3 words. O&A is organizational network analysis. It's something that's been around for a little while. The tools keep getting stronger and stronger. And I know our Connected Commons group has long been at the forefront of this. Rob Cross is sometimes called the father of O&A, and it's something that organizations can really benefit from. And there's multiple ways to do it as well, multiple ways to gather the data. And I'm sure different companies have experimented with different approaches. So great to hear that you're a big advocate of that, Joanna, and that you're seeing positive results from that kind of work.
Yep, I'm absolutely going to tap you to expand on that in another exchange group soon enough. But I do see that Darby Barton has a great question. Just some more curiosity about the Leadership Exchange program and its design, maybe in the outcomes that you've seen.
Yeah, so this was recently launched as of about 2 weeks ago or so, but really the intent is that it is a portal landing page for all of our people leaders, and to grab content at their fingertips, or to engage in virtual coaching, or to engage in each other. And it's centered around kind of our leadership characteristics and pillars. And so they can kind of dive into content around what it means to lead and inspire. But I would say too early to tell kind of our engagement on it. I do know that we did have a pilot group and we got great feedback, but we're super excited about it.
Nice. We look forward to hearing more about it, since it sounds like it's pretty new, but always want to hear more about that. Speaking of leaders, Annette, you mentioned earlier, I think it was Annette, your ERGs, your employee resource groups, and the importance of those for sort of broader collaboration cohorts, one amongst many approaches you're taking. I'm wondering the connection from your ERGs to leadership in the company. We did a study several years ago, and one of the findings was that tapping into those that lead ERGs is a good source for leadership development and experience in the organization. Have you found over the past couple of years that your ERGs are providing that sort of pipeline for you, or how are you leveraging that aspect?
Yeah, definitely. I think the ERGs give, and leading them and being active in them, give people so much exposure and visibility to maybe people that would not have been known otherwise. So it's been a great source for us. And like I said, they're definitely evolving. They're pretty well established here in the US, and we're really working on the other countries becoming more a part of that. Yeah. But showing that and seeing the visibility, very active, even through COVID. You know, they switched over to virtual pretty darn fast, and pretty remarkable with the things that they've come up with to engage people in.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear, because so many things in our lives didn't switch to virtual right away. And it took a while for some of our, personal connection groups, family groups, whatever, to realize that this was going to be with us for a while and we needed to make that change. Couple of questions on platforms. So Diane had a question. Oh, and I see, Joanna, you're answering it there in the chat. What third-party platforms used for the leader exchange? So you're saying it's built on SharePoint and links into the LMS. I was going to ask a follow-up back on all of the mental health, but also just any of the holistic well-being approaches you're taking. Are there any key vendors that you're using there? There's so many of them out there, particularly that have sprouted up in the past few years. Any vendors that you want to mention that you have found particularly helpful?
Yeah, we did our mental health first aider training through MFA England, so we're headquartered in the UK. As for, I think, our benefit programs, Annette, I would defer to you for kind of what services we're using.
Oh, it seems like there's so many. I mean, we have Virgin Pulse, and then there's all kinds of things connected to that. And I think she mentioned care.com, Magellan for our EAP, and it's kind of like a spider web. It goes everywhere, all different types of programs.
And then on the financial well-being side, presumably you've got a lot of your own internal experts and information.
Yeah. We do.
Maybe don't have to look outside for that.
Right. Yeah. And being able to offer those free of charge to our employees has been great, because then, we're all consumers. So they're not just employees, they're consumers too. And it just gives them a greater understanding for some of the things that we do.
Well, Carrie, we only have a couple of minutes left. Did you have any final thoughts or questions to give to our guests?
I think the questions coming to mind for me is just looking at the rest of the year. Do you have any new aspiration that you haven't already shared with us that we may be able to hear in another year or two?
One of the areas that I'm very focused in is this onboarding and building the new hire cohorts.
Yeah.
So that's new for us. Really building that out to be at least a 6-month program where we don't dump everything on people their first week, where they can't put it in context and can't possibly remember it all, but spreading it out over the 6 months as an opportunity to bring that cohort together all the time. So we're looking at like Fridays at 9 a.m., 15 minutes of content, and then it's just connect all through their team site so things like that. So I'm working a lot on that, continuing just to build these connection events, making sure they're happening across the region, not just in, the headquarters location.
That's fantastic. Well, as a favor for joining us on this call, I will definitely follow up with you around some of our Connected Commons resources on onboarding and kind of taking a network approach into that, because I am sure it would resonate with your culture.
Yeah, and I'll also mention for both you as an I4CP member organization, and for any other members on the call, I think it was just in the past week, we have launched a 2.0 version of our onboarding toolkit. Right. So Annette, if you haven't downloaded that, definitely grab it. We've updated it. It was maybe getting 2-3 years old at this point. We've updated it with new information on hybrid and flexible work and what that's changed in onboarding, but other changes that we've learned as well. So take a look at that, and I encourage other members on the call to do so too. Zeta has helpfully put the link for that in the chat. Well, we're at the end of our hour. I want to thank Carrie for co-hosting with me today, and also our special guests Annette and Joanna from Experian. It's been great having you. We've loved all the sharing. You've been very forthcoming with so much of the great work you're doing at Experian. So appreciate it. You're getting lots of thanks from folks in the chat. So thank you again. As a final reminder for everyone, our conference is coming up quick. The end of this upcoming month, March 27th through the 30th in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you're interested in more information, go to i4cp.com/conference. You can register there and learn more about it. Otherwise, look forward to having as many of you as possible back every Thursday for these Next Practice weekly calls. We'll see you again next Thursday, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and always go online to catch the recording if you miss any session. So thanks again, Carrie. Thanks again, Annette and Joanna, and everyone have a great week.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.